Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Terminus by James Ferraro. This is the third installment out of the Four Pieces For Mirai series, with the previous installment Neurogeist being released not that far ago, an album that in my opinion managed to be the better one out of the Four Pieces of Mirai series, because when it comes to the initial first EP, I didn't really feel this release all that much, even if there were many people talking and praising this release. There was also the album Requiem for Recycled Earth, which also showed James Ferraro going into a different direction, which in my opinion is pretty interesting. It's this combination of electronic music with structures and aesthetics that would be more reminiscent of modern classical music. And Terminus pretty much follows this path but goes into a few more different directions. For one, I would say that this release compared to the rest of the series is definitely the darkest one, and it's definitely the most aggressive one as well. It has some occasions where the album can be quite intense and have some elements of instrumentation that are interesting enough, considering that in some of the occasions it feels like it has taken samples out of extreme metal music. You have some heavy drum fills in some occasions and also some screams and growls being sampled throughout this album, and it just pops up in certain occasions and it certainly enhances the experience. It adds so much and it really helps for this release to feel darker, more aggressive, and overall sound somewhat different compared to what James Ferraro did with the previous installments. Now this album is 14 tracks and it's kinda short, it goes for 40 minutes or something, but this album is basically separated in two parts. Now half of this album, the short tracks in this track listing, which are the singled ones, these tracks feel more of interludes, and after a point they become pretty uninteresting and kind of unnecessary. In fact, they sort of ruin the whole pace of this project because there's so many of those tracks, and when you get an actual track then it immediately transitions into those sections which feel really forgettable and kind of unnecessary because they're basically going into the same formula, and I don't think that it really works all that much. Just with the first track that goes for only 20 seconds, you pretty much get the idea with tracks 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 and even 13, which is the longest one out of those tracks, which basically all of those tracks feel like sort of background noise. All of those tracks have this background ambience to them, which is sort of dark, and then you have some elements of noise here and there. There is a bit crash effect in some occasions, and you also have this standard and basic sound of this broken fax machine, which as a sound by itself I like it, I find it to be pretty interesting, but it's basically the same thing over and over again, and after a point it quickly becomes tedious. And the thing is that in most of the occasions there's not a twist to them, something that would sound somewhat more interesting, something a bit more different. All of those tracks go into kind of the same directions. There's only the 13th track that is the longest one, where at the second half you get this synth passage, which is also going to be featured in the 14th and final track with a different pitch and a different tempo to it, but it's still not enough to captivate me, and it sucks because we're talking about half of the track list over here being really uninteresting. But the thing is that getting the rest of the album with the scaled numbers, we actually get some of the greatest material I've ever heard from James Ferraro, ever. Now, comparing Terminus to the previous installments, this one is actually the most simplistic when it comes to its structures. It's definitely the most straightforward album, but this doesn't really hurt the experience. Instead, I really enjoy some of the repetitive natures with some of the instrumentals over here, and there are definitely some spectacular moments. Like I said, I like that this one in particular feels a bit more aggressive. The beats that are company to some of those occasions. They're pretty repetitive and samey, but they're really well done. And in some occasions you have those spots that really add to the experience. The main part that I would say constantly changes and never stays the same is with the choir vocals. These are the ones that give the main sense of a modern classical structure. And in the occasion of Terminus, the choir vocals sound darker than ever. They're pretty haunting. The synths over here sound spectacular as well. Tracks like 2, 4 and 6 have some amazing structures to them. There's also the track 8 that has some somewhat different synth passages that work amazingly in this occasion. The beat structure of the track 12 is spectacular, and track 14 is an amazing way to end this album with this excellent synth passage and those brutal elements popping up in great occasions. Just like with the other works in the series though, this one is also pretty conceptual, so some of the elements definitely sound one-dimensional. Some of the scenes and the beats and the choirs get repeated a lot over here, but when it comes structurally and melodically, I think that we have to do with one of the greatest James Ferraro projects, and definitely his best in the series. This album is spectacular, but unfortunately it's just half of it. The other half, with those really uninteresting interludes, it's just average, or in other occasions even below average, so it really drags the album down a bit. Like, you can easily skip those moments. Like, it's pretty apparent that you go from background ambience to actual tracks with structure. So it sucks that a big portion of this album puts it down, but I cannot help but think that this is a really great work despite its major inconsistency from its main two parts, because this album contains some amazing stuff, easily some of the best stuff I've heard from James Ferraro, and so it's kind of enough in order to consider this as one of his most significant works, even with its shortcomings. I'm going to give Terminus a 7 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.